Hello and welcome to this SAP TechEd live session on establishing a governance model for SAP BTP. Really happy that you're joining us today. And we're going to start with BTP. BTP, as you probably heard in the keynote, is used by now more than 20,000 customers for different purposes, for different use cases, whether it's for extensions, so keep the core clean, whether it's for integration with SAP solutions and non-SAP solutions, whether it's for deriving insights out of data, or whether it's for customizations. SAP also uses BTP to build and deliver cloud applications, in addition also to partners building applications on BTP. So BTP usage and adoption is really growing in our customer base, and it's being used more and more, and therefore also the scale of the BTP usage increases constantly. And this brings some challenges, what we hear. So once customers might have different contracts for BTP assets and also different global accounts resulting from those contracts, especially if multiple departments within an organization are using BTP. This results sometimes in unclear ownership of accounts, apps, or tenants, which can also lead to security risks if apps or accounts are not secure. In some cases, services cannot really be used or applications cannot be used due to missing entitlements. In some cases, there are lack of transparency on cost and who consumes what resources. And also, if certain application is not working, you need to know who is responsible, who has to fix the application. So this results basically in a simple question in many cases: who owns actually our BTP and our BTP accounts? So let's see how we can bring some order in this jungle of BTP accounts and applications. Well, first, let's look at how traditionally IT teams have been set up. There was a clear separation typically between development teams, teams who did administration and operations, for instance, on databases, and teams who did support for end users, so solving problems of the end user. Right? And this really focused on different personas, right? So developers were mostly interested in getting their features implemented. Operations was interested in keeping the system stable and up to date and secure, right? And support mostly focused on tickets, solving tickets. However, in the cloud world, this is not the ideal setup because you want to leverage the advantages of a cloud deployment model, which is having possibility to have really fast release cycles, react really early on feedback from end users and collect data, and to continuously improve your application. Right? So that's why there was a move towards the so-called DevOps approach, which means bringing the different job types, roles, developers, support engineers, and infrastructure experts into one team together, who are then responsible for fully developing and operating their application. So having end-to-end responsibility within one team. However, you cannot have completely independent teams. So if you scale this up, right, you might end up with completely isolated teams operating in completely different ways. And also, this is not the ideal way because you want to establish some common standards. You want to make sure that there's knowledge shared between the different teams. Someone needs to take ownership or have an overview over all the applications that are used and deployed in an organization. And last but not least, of course, you need to comply with certain regulations, security requirements, data protection, and privacy guidelines. So that's why 100% DevOps, completely isolated independent teams, is not possible and not desired because some central guidance and governance is really needed. So what we are proposing is to complement the industry cloud development teams with a central platform engineering team, also called sometimes COE, Center of Excellence, which really defines the guardrails, central guidelines on how teams can build and operate applications. the central team would also be responsible for defining a structure for BTP accounts, how the accounts are structured and managed, and also, in the end, has to also manage the cost which is associated with these accounts. These teams, the platform team and the cloud development teams, can actually be part of different organizations. In the development teams, you will find also more and more people from the business side in so-called fusion teams working together with professional developers to create solutions. And also partners can take over different roles, whether it's on the engineering platform side or on the development side. So let's take a closer look at the distribution of responsibility between, on the one hand side, the central platform team, and on the other hand, the cloud development teams. As I mentioned, the cloud development teams are responsible for developing and operating their specific applications on BTP. They follow a DevOps approach. You build it, you run it. They release early and often, collect feedback from end users, and make continuous improvements. On the other hand, the platform team sets up and defines the cloud landscape. They also maintain it and keep it running. They have typically experience in development, but also in continuous integration and infrastructure and delivery setups. The platform engineering team really shares knowledge with the cloud development teams on how to best use the platform and the various technologies and services. They also define guidelines, as I mentioned, on security, on data privacy, on connecting to backend systems, on secure connection to that, on usage of APIs which are released, and so forth. So through that guidance and guardrails, they also really help to drive adoption of BTP as a platform for innovation across the whole organization. So let's take a closer look on how such an account setup defined by a central team could look like. And here we really have different levels in BTP. It all starts with the global account, which is also linked to a contract. So that's how you get entitlements for services and applications that you can actually use in your BTP account. On the other end, we have sub-accounts where you can create environments, for instance, an ABAP environment, a Cloud Foundry environment, and Kyma environment. And that's where you can actually build and deploy and run applications. You can consume services and subscribe to SAP-delivered applications. So this is actually where the resource consumption happens. And sub-accounts are also always linked to one particular region or data center. In between, we have a so-called directory level, and directories really allow you to structure multiple sub-accounts into one group. And on each level, global account level, directory, and sub-account level, you can define administrators who are responsible for managing the respective assets within that directory or within that sub-account. You can also define read-only users who cannot change anything, but just can see what's happening in that sub-account, what consumption is happening, and so forth. Directories can also be nested, right? So you can really create complex or structures of sub-accounts. Hundreds of sub-accounts can easily be structured with this directory structure. So for setting up these accounts, we also recommend that you basically model a multi-staged development environment. So having one sub-account for development, one sub-account for testing, and one sub-account for production. And of course, you want to also restrict access to the production account, but also the test account. Right? So developers work only on the dev account, whereas then there's automatic transport happening from the development to the test account and then to production once the testing is successful. So this is a recommended setup to have at least 3 sub-accounts. You can also use sub-accounts to separate content between different development teams or different departments, or to separate high security scenarios, which really need access to sensitive systems, to your core systems, from more widely used and widely accessed sub-accounts, which are not touching your critical backend systems. And furthermore, you can also use dedicated sub-accounts to run central services, such as the SAP Integration Suite, or SAP Build Workzone for a central entry point, because there you would integrate many different apps from different sites, from different domains into one user interface or into one integration engine. Right, so these are the different ways that you can separate content and development and applications from different teams. Now, you also want to make sure that you manage the cost which are associated with sub-accounts, because especially in a consumption-based model, the usage of services is dynamic and in the end paid via an invoice. Therefore, we offer with the BTP Cockpit the possibility to monitor usage on a sub-account level, on a service level, but also aggregated on a global account level. So all the usage from the different sub-accounts within that global account would be aggregated and then compared to your monthly credits that you have available. So you can exactly see how much of your available credits for this month you have already used up. And this is also what we recommend to regularly check the usage and the associated cost for the Cloud Cockpit. Or you can also do this via the API of the Usage Data Management Service, and then also use that API for us to integrate in third-party solutions for monitoring usage and consumption. Even before you start with implementing applications and scenarios, you can check the estimated cost with a tool in the SAP Discovery Center. You can pick and choose the services that you need, the quantity, and then have a calculation on what the estimated cost would be. As I mentioned, especially when you combine consumption-based pricing models like the Cloud Platform Enterprise Price Agreement or pay-as-you-go model with subscription contracts, it's really important to monitor the usage and the consumption to make really sure that the expected volume of a subscription contract is not exceeded. You can also use the API to set up alerts when your cloud credit consumption reaches a certain level or is actually exceeding the available cloud credit amount. Here we have linked a blog which describes how to set up these email alerts. And finally, if you need to distribute the cost for BTP internally within your organization, you can do this also based on this usage analytics report from the cloud reporting, but you can also define custom metrics according to your needs to distribute the cost. Now, if we take this one level further and use automation tools to automate the setup and the management of our infrastructure, this not only helps to establish a governance model, but it also, of course, makes the whole operations more efficient and also makes setups for different projects really repeatable. Right? So you can create templates for certain types of development projects and then always have the same setup, the same account structure for these different projects. We also see that customers have existing automation infrastructure in place for managing their cloud assets, which they now also want to leverage for SAP BTP. And with Terraform, there's a de facto industry standard for infrastructure as a code, as I mentioned, which allows customers to manage cloud infrastructure assets. It's widely adopted, and it has more than 3,000 providers available. And now we also have a provider for SAP BTP for Terraform. And I want to quickly show you a demo on how you can use this to manage your BTP account. Okay, so here's the provider. You can download it, and if you have Terraform installed, you can use it straight away. It also has some examples, so you can take a look at that to learn more how to actually use it. I have here prepared a global account where I've already created a directory for a finance team to build the applications and run them. So as you can see, as recommended, I really have created a development account, test account, and production account for that team. And I've also attached labels, for instance here, who's the owner, what team owns that account, what's the cost center, right, to really have an overview on who is using that account and who is responsible and what happens there. So now let's say we want to onboard a new team from the sales department who also wants to now build applications on BTP. Here I switch to the Terraform console, and I have prepared a script here. I'm going to start this in a moment. As you can see here, I pass to the Terraform provider some variables. For instance, a unit name, which is sales, short name, cost center, and the email addresses of the roles architect, owner, and team. All right, so let's create this landscape for our sales team. And while this runs, it will take a minute. I'm going to show you the how you can actually customize this. So you can, I have to confirm first of all. Terraform tells me that there's 25 entities which will be added in my account. That's great. So let's run this. So with Terraform, you can pass some variables. Of course, a lot of other variables, for instance, the region where the account should be created, I didn't specify. This is in some configuration files, which are part of the project here. Also, you can do validation, right? So to always enforce a naming structure, of dev, test, and production, for instance, and to avoid arbitrary naming. You can also define here in this configuration file the entitlements that should be assigned to this new sub-account. So what are the services that shall be available in that sub-account, also the amount. So we see here that there is the alert notification service with the standard plan entitled, and also SAP HANA Cloud. So you can really customize this and have some logic to really adapt the templates to different needs, and to also provide entitlements to different services that you need. So let's see, it's still running. Now it's completed, so it has added those 25 entities, and let's check in our BTP cockpit what is the result. So let's do a refresh. And as you can see here, there's now a new directory, sales, which has been created, again with 3 sub-accounts. And in the labels, we really see the values that I've passed in the command line have now been attached as labels to the sub-account, to the directory, and also the respective sub-accounts. Right. So if there's an issue with one of the applications, I know who to contact. And I can also do cost. I could now also do cost calculation, right, based on the cost center, and distribute the overall cost to the respective teams and departments. If we go into the sub-account, we can also see the entitlements which were defined in the configuration file. So a Cloud Foundry environment has been created with an endpoint. Again, I see here the labels for the sub-account which have been inherited also from the directory. And yes, I have the standard plan of the alert notification service, and I also have my SAP HANA Cloud plans with certain quota attached to this. Right, so now I could extend the script and, for instance, increase the quota for my HANA Cloud schemas for production account. Yeah, but you get the idea that this is really helping to automate the setup, not only to reduce the manual effort doing all of this for the cockpit, yeah, but also helping to set up a governance so that you're always doing this based on a template. Good. Let's switch back to the presentation. Yeah, so you see, this is how you can get in control of the jungle, right, and hopefully allow a more organized growth of your BTP applications and accounts, right, to avoid getting trapped in the jungle. Here are some learning opportunities. We have great learning journeys out there for BTP, also the administration part. So I would definitely encourage you to check this out. With that, let's come to the Q&A. Are there any questions available?
Live Q&A.
Okay, we have one question here from Thomas. Is it part of the COE's role to perform code checks on development efforts or just provide governance and recommendations from a BTP platform level? Of course, the actual task and responsibilities of a COE would vary from organization to organization. Yeah. So the more mature your development teams are, the more responsibility they can take. Yeah. But definitely anything that touches the overall platform, the global account of BTP, should be governed by your COE. So what services to be used, how much quota, yeah, this should be centrally defined. You can then have local administrators, yeah, in a development team who then assigns the quota to different sub-accounts. So you give an overall quota of 20, for instance, 20 gigabytes of memory for Cloud Foundry, and then have a local administrator distribute this further. Yeah? But you always need to manage the costs on a global account level. Okay, next question. Is it possible to allocate budget at the sub-account level to limit usage? So you cannot actually allocate a budget in terms of cloud credits, for instance, on a sub-account. However, you can, as I explained, you can configure entitlements and quota at the sub-account level. Right? So you can define what services can be used in that sub-account. And for certain services which have a fixed quota, like the Cloud Foundry runtime, you can say in this sub-account I can maximum use, let's say, 8 gigabytes of Cloud Foundry runtime. And with that way you can actually limit the cost indirectly, but you cannot set an absolute budget in terms of cloud credits or euros or dollars on a sub-account. The reason here also is because depending on the metric that is being used for a service, as I mentioned, all the usage is aggregated on a global account level, right? So only on the global account level the final consumption and bill creation is possible. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more. Question from Renju: can we create new directories and move existing BTP sub-accounts to them? Yes, you can create new directories and you can move existing sub-accounts into that directory to really organize this. So you can grow, right? You start with only a few sub-accounts, and all of a sudden you realize, I have 20 or more, and I need to structure them a bit. So at that point, you can introduce directories. Okay, one more question. Can we have a custom IDP for platform users? Yes, this is possible. This was not possible with, earlier, but with the so-called feature set B global accounts, this is now possible. Okay, I think we still have questions to go. So let's take this one again from Thomas. Recommendations for influencing and helping skill up traditional ABAP developers to transition to BTP's build options. Yeah, so that's a great question, really. ABAP developers, of course, we have the ABAP environment, or called Steampunk, on BTP, and that's a great way for traditional for ABAP developers moving to the cloud. But of course, they can also get familiar with our build offering, our low-code solutions with SAP Build, or now the new build code solution, right? If they want to get into Java or JavaScript development. Yeah, so there are lots of learning journeys, especially for SAP build apps available, which ABAP developers can use. Okay, one last question. Zubia, will API alerts proactively shut down services if they cross a limit or a threshold? No. I mean, you can do this via API, yeah, but the alerts are completely custom, so you get an email, and then you can also define in your own code, right, in your own custom application, what happens if a certain limit is reached. So there's no default feature in the cockpit, but you can build this as a custom solution. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks for joining this live session, and enjoy the rest of the sessions of SAP TechEd. Thanks.